What if the reason your belly fat refuses to budge after 35 has almost nothing to do with willpower, calories, or how hard you're working out? What if the real issue isn't that you're doing something wrong, but that your body is playing by a completely different biological rulebook than it did in your 20s?
If you've ever thought, I eat less than I used to, I exercise more than before, so why does my waistline keep growing? Stay with me, because once you understand this, everything finally starts to make sense. I'm Dr. Nimra Raza. I'm a physician, and today we're going to talk about the real reason visceral fat becomes so stubborn after 35, and why most advice completely misses the point. This matters far beyond appearance. Visceral fat, the deep fat around your organs, is metabolically active. It's strongly linked to insulin resistance, heart disease, fatty liver, cognitive decline, and accelerated aging. So this is not about fitting into genes. This is about long-term health and longevity. Now, here's the problem. Most people believe fat gain after 35 is just slowing metabolism. That sounds simple, but it's incomplete and honestly misleading. Metabolism doesn't just slow down randomly, it adapts in response to signals. And after 35, those signals change dramatically.
This is where it gets interesting. Visceral fat is not passive storage. Think of it as an endocrine organ. It listens, it talks, and it reacts. And after 35, the hormonal environment inside your body starts shifting in ways that strongly favor fat storage, especially in the abdomen.
Let's start with insulin, because this is the foundation. Insulin is a storage hormone. Its job is to move glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells. When insulin works well, your body can switch easily between burning sugar and burning fat.
But over time, especially with chronic stress, poor sleep, ultra-processed foods, and frequent snacking, cells become less responsive to insulin. This is called insulin resistance. When that happens, your pancreas releases more insulin to compensate, and high insulin levels send one very clear message to your fat cells: store energy, do not release it.
Visceral fat is especially sensitive to insulin. So even if you're eating fewer calories, high insulin can lock fat in place, making it extremely difficult to burn. Here's what most people don't realize. After 35, insulin resistance can develop even without obvious weight gain at first. Hormonal changes, reduced muscle mass, and mitochondrial inefficiency all contribute. You can look normal weight and still have increasing visceral fat.
Now let's layer in cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. In short bursts, it's helpful. But chronic cortisol elevation, which is incredibly common after 35 due to work stress, poor sleep, constant stimulation, and under-recovery, changes where fat is stored. Cortisol preferentially drives fat storage into the abdominal area.
Why? Because visceral fat has more cortisol receptors than subcutaneous fat. It's biologically designed to respond quickly to stress signals. So when cortisol stays elevated, your body literally redirects energy storage toward your belly. This is why people often notice abdominal fat gain during stressful periods, even if their diet hasn't changed.
And here's the vicious cycle. Visceral fat itself increases inflammation. Inflammation worsens insulin resistance. Insulin resistance raises insulin. High insulin makes fat harder to burn, and stress keeps cortisol elevated. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop. Now let's talk about hormones that don't get enough attention. For women, estrogen doesn't just decline with age, it fluctuates unpredictably during perimenopause. Those fluctuations disrupt insulin sensitivity and fat distribution. Estrogen normally helps keep fat stored in hips and thighs. When estrogen signaling becomes irregular, fat shifts toward the abdomen. For men, testosterone gradually declines. Testosterone supports muscle mass, insulin sensitivity, and fat oxidation. As levels fall, muscle mass decreases, resting energy expenditure drops, and fat storage becomes more likely, especially viscerally. This isn't about deficiency. It's about signaling efficiency. And muscle matters more than most people realize.
Muscle is not just for strength or appearance, it's a metabolic organ. It acts as a glucose sink. The more muscle you have, the more glucose you can dispose of without needing large insulin spikes. After 35, if strength training is inconsistent or absent, muscle mass slowly declines. This process is subtle but powerful. Less muscle means poorer glucose handling, higher insulin levels, and greater fat storage. Again, especially in the abdomen. Now let's go one level deeper. Mitochondria. Mitochondria are your cellular power plants. They decide whether nutrients get burned or stored. With aging, mitochondrial efficiency declines, especially if physical activity becomes repetitive, sleep is poor, or inflammation is high. When mitochondria become less efficient, your body becomes metabolically conservative. It prioritizes energy storage over energy expenditure. This is a survival response, not a failure.
So when someone says, my body just won't burn fat anymore, what they're really experiencing is a shift in metabolic signaling toward preservation. This is why aggressive calorie restriction often backfires after 35. Severe dieting increases cortisol, lowers thyroid signaling, reduces resting energy expenditure, and further impairs mitochondrial function. The scale may drop briefly, but visceral fat often remains or returns quickly.
This is where many people get stuck. They eat less, they do more cardio, they feel exhausted, and their belly fat doesn't move. Here's the truth. Visceral fat is hormonally protected. You cannot bully it away. You have to change the signals. So, how do you apply this knowledge in real life? First, consistency beats intensity. The body responds to repeated signals over time, not short bursts of extreme effort. Strength training becomes non-negotiable, not for burning calories, but for restoring insulin sensitivity and rebuilding metabolic tissue. Even 2 to 3 well-structured sessions per week can dramatically change how your body handles energy.
Second, meal timing matters more than most people think. Constant grazing keeps insulin elevated all day. Allowing insulin to fall between meals gives fat cells permission to release stored energy. This doesn't require extreme fasting. It requires structure.
Third, sleep is not optional. Even one night of poor sleep measurably increases insulin resistance and cortisol the next day. Chronic sleep deprivation shifts fat storage toward the abdomen, regardless of calories. Fourth, stress management is metabolic medicine. Walking, breath work, resistance training, and reducing evening stimulation all lower cortisol signaling. When cortisol drops, visceral fat becomes more accessible. Now let's talk about common mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes is chasing scale weight instead of metabolic health. You can lose weight and still worsen insulin resistance if the approach is too aggressive. Another mistake is overdoing cardio while under-recovering. Excessive cardio without strength training can increase cortisol and accelerate muscle loss, making the problem worse. And finally, copying strategies from your 20s. Your body is different now. It's not broken, it's adaptive. Some people should be cautious with drastic dietary changes, especially those with diabetes, hormonal disorders, or a history of disordered eating. This is not about extremes. It's about alignment with physiology. Now imagine the long-term benefits of getting this right. Better energy throughout the day, improved mental clarity, reduced inflammation, lower risk of cardiovascular disease, improved blood sugar control, a body that feels responsive again, not resistant. When visceral fat decreases, metabolic flexibility improves. Your body becomes better at switching between fuel sources. You stop feeling trapped in constant hunger and fatigue. And perhaps most importantly, you regain trust in your body. Here's what I want you to remember. Visceral fat after 35 is not a personal failure. It's a biological signal. And once you understand the signal, you can change the message. Your body is always listening. The question is, what are you telling it every day?
If this helped you see your health differently, I invite you to continue learning with me, because when science replaces frustration, real change finally becomes possible. I'm Dr. Nimra Raza, and I'll see you in the next video.